The time is 11:11, Jerusalem time, and it's a great time to read Basi Legani. Basi Legani is the discourse given by the Lubavitcher Rebbe of blessed memory on this day in the Hebrew year 5711 and the year 1951. What's really interesting about it regarding this year is that on the PL89 Gematriatic Quantum Thought Calendar, this is a calendar of both the sun and the moon. It's two calendars in one. It's the Gregorian calendar, which today is January 28th, and it's also a Hebrew calendar, which today is Yud Shevat, the 10th day of Shevat. And it's also a chart that, if you are familiar with the 72 names, the 72 letter name as it's called, it's formatted in exactly this way. There's eight columns and then 9 rows, 72 names. And it's a calendar for that too. And on that count, today, Yud Shevat happens to not only come out on, it's the 51st name. Today is a 51st name. From when it started, I won't go into the cycles, but the point is, why is 51 important? Because it was in the year 1951 that the original Yud Shevat, when Lubavitcher Rebbe became Rebbe. So the fact that in my counting of the 72 names, which parenthetically the Alter Rebbe, the Baal Tanya, spoke much about, the 72 names, the 42 letter name, the 42 names, and my work is counting both of them, but in this chart as well, that chart also counts the 42 letter name as well. So 11:11, if you watch some of the videos of Rabbi Reuven Wolf in Mayan Yisrael, he goes extensively, especially in his recent Mashiach update series, describes in depth the connection between the number 11 and the Lubavitcher Rebbe of blessed memory. The number 11 is all about Mashiach in relation to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, in that he goes through it. You can look, I don't want to go spend time on that now, but here is a candle lighting. It's also the yard site, the anniversary of passing of the Frierdiker Rebbe, the Rebbe's father-in-law, which was, interesting enough, exactly on this day, Yud Shevat, exactly 1 year before. So there's no accidents, nothing is by chance, everything is exact. And this candle is lit in memory of the Frierdiker Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson. I don't know his father's name, I don't remember it if I ever knew it, but and in memory of the Nesius of the Lubavitcher Rebbe on this day 75 years ago, and then 76 years ago for the yard site. And 75, Rabbi Wolf talks about it a lot as well. He if you look up Rabbi Reuven Wolf, Mayan Yisrael, and do Mashiach update. He has a series of 9 videos that go in depth from the history of America and the history of Chabad, parallels them, and he goes through history with the Chabad dynasty of the 7 Rebbes in relation to Mashiach and relation to America, and Napoleon. Talks about how and he goes and he mentions the number 11 there, and he also mentions, I forgot what I was thinking about, but It's a great series. Okay, now, this day is when the Rebbe became Rebbe. Initially, I think he didn't want to, and then with some persuasion, then he got into it. He took his role, and he really got into it like an amazing way. And really was one of the most influential individuals in human history, and at least in the 20th century for sure, if not all human history, but definitely one of the tops in the 20th century for sure. And he read this discourse. This is his famous discourse when he became the Rebbe. And there is so much, if you pay attention to each word he's saying, there's so much messianic and redemption, messianic information and information about the Geula, the redemption. So, without further ado, here we go. I was looking for it in Yiddish. I thought it might be a good thing to read it in Yiddish, but since he read it in Yiddish, he said it in Yiddish, and then he has the Hebrew here. But just for time and because of its length, I'm going to try to go through the whole thing. So I'll just read it in English. My revered father-in-law, the Rebbe of blessed memory, begins with a verse from Shir HaShirim, which serves. Oh yeah, this Basi Legani, said in year 5711, can be found on the Chabad.org website, and this discourse was translated by Eli Toger, I think, Touger. Okay, here it is. Basi Legani, my revered father-in-law, the Rebbe of blessed memory, begins with a verse from Shir HaShirim, which serves as an analogy for the ongoing love relationship between God and His bride, the Jewish people. Basi Legani achosi kala, I've come into my garden, my sister, my bride. Shir HaShirim, the Midrash observes that the word used is not legan, which would mean to the garden, but legani, which means to my garden, which our sages interpret as meaning leganuni, to my bridal chamber. The Midrash explains that the verse is referring to the time of the giving of the Torah and the construction of the sanctuary. At that time, God came into His garden, meaning His presence was manifest in this world, which can be described as a garden. However, the verse does not really say, I came into the garden, it says my garden, implying that God shared a connection with the garden beforehand. The divine presence is thus saying, although for a time I have been removed from the world, now, with the giving of the Torah and the construction of the sanctuary, I have come into my garden, my bridal chamber, into the place which my essence was originally revealed. The Midrash continues, for the essence of the Shechinah, the divine presence, was manifest in the lower realms. This concludes the wording of the Midrash. The focus on the expression, the essence of the Shechinah, the Alter Rebbe states that this name is used to describe the divine presence because it dwells and is enclosed in all the worlds. There are two dimensions to the Alter Rebbe's definition. The light that descends and is revealed in the lower realms, and that is enclosed in those realms. The latter term implies that just as clothes are tailored to fit the person who wears them, God's divine light undergoes an adjustment so that it can be internalized within the worlds in which it shines. The term Shechinah thus implies not only Giloi, revelation, but also Hislabshus, in clothing. As in the scriptural phrase, and I will dwell among them, the Shechinah represents the initial revelation of Or Ein Sof, of God's infinite light. From the Alter Rebbe's statement that the initial revelation of Or Ein Sof is called Shechinah. As the Maimar proceeds to explain, the term Shechinah applies on many levels, for every rung in the spiritual cosmos stems from a higher rung, which invests its lowest dimension in the new, subordinate framework that comes into being. The Alter Rebbe is referring to the highest level of the spiritual cosmos that can be termed Shechinah. It is evident that the Shechinah transcends by far even the loftiest of the four spiritual worlds, the world of Atzilus. Indeed, the Shechinah surpasses the divine light that precedes the initial self-imposed contraction of divine revelation that is known as the Tzimtzum. For the initial revelation occurs in the Or Ein Sof that precedes the Tzimtzum. And the Mittler Rebbe writes, the ray of the Kav and the Chut, meaning the narrow vector and thread of divine light that shine forth following the Tzimtzum in relation to the essence of God's infinite light, is termed Shechinah. For the meaning of the term Shechinah varies according to the spiritual level of its context. In relation to Atzilus, for example, it is Malchus, meaning sovereignty, the lowest of the spheros that is termed Shechinah. Even with regard to this use of the term, the Tzemach Tzedek explains that it applies only when Malchus descends and serves as the rung of Atik, meaning when it serves as the source for the creation of the world of Bria. For only then can it be said to enclose itself in the lower levels of existence. The passage of Pesach Eliyahu refers to Malchus with the analogy of a mouth, meaning man's power of speech. In speech there are two dimensions. A person's potential to speak, meaning one of the powers of his soul, and B, the actual words he says, which can be appreciated by others as well. However, when Malchus is still in Atzilus, it is united with them, with the spheros of Atzilus. This parallels the power of speech as it exists within a person's own set of potentials. And the term Shechinah cannot be applied to it. Only when it descends to the lower realms, like a person who speaks to others, is the use of that term appropriate. Nevertheless, this does not contradict the earlier statement that even so lofty a level as the Kav, which is spiritually superior by far to Atzilus, is termed Shechinah, for the term Shechinah, as used by our sages, refers specifically to the level of Malchus of Atzilus, and even then, only insofar as it becomes the level of Atik in the world of Bria, and in its source, however, meaning in the state in which it exists in relation to God's infinite light, meaning the revelation of light that precedes the Tzimtzum, even the Kav is termed Shechinah. The Rebbe Maharash writes that one of the reasons why the Kav is called Shechinah in relation to God's infinite light explanation is necessary, because even though the Kav represents the descent in relation to the light that shines before the Tzimtzum, the second dimension of the definition of the term Shechinah seemingly does not apply to it, for the Kav itself is not enclosed in the worlds, but is merely a vector of light. Nevertheless, the term is appropriate because the Kav is drawn down with the intent that it become enclosed in the worlds and in the souls of the Jewish people. Hence, even its initial revelation, which is not enclosed in the worlds, is termed Shechinah because of that intent. On even a higher level, in its initial source, as it precedes the Tzimtzum, there is a loftier definition of the term Shechinah. As the Rebbe Rashab explains, the revelation of divine light prior to the Tzimtzum is termed Shechinah. As explained, the term Shechinah implies two functions: Gilui, revelation, and Eslabshus, in clothing. Before the Tzimtzum, there was Gilui, but seemingly the concept of Eslabshus does not apply because on that level of being it is incorrect to speak of the existence, indeed, even the possibility of the existence of the worlds, let alone God's light adapting and being enclosed in them. To explain how the term Shechinah can nevertheless apply even before the Tzimtzum, in general there are three levels of godly light that precede the Tzimtzum. First, there are two fundamental divisions. The essence of the divine light, the Etzem Ha'or, which is above all revelation, and the diffusion of the light, Hispashtos Ha'or. On this level, the concept of revelation is relevant. The diffusion of the light subdivides into two levels. A, the revelation of light for God himself. On this level, there is no conception of existence outside of him. His light is revealed not for others, but as a natural function of the light itself. God has the potential to shine forth light, and that potential seeks expression. This revelation is the source of the light of Sovev Kol Almin, the light that transcends, literally encompasses all worlds. And B, the revelation of the light that bears a relation to the worlds as it is for himself. The mimer is referring to the light that is intended to be enclosed within the worlds as it exists in a preparatory stage, meaning before the Tzimtzum. This revelation is the source of the light of Memale Kol Almin, the light that is internalized in all the worlds. To explain by analogy, it is like a person who prepares the message he wants to communicate to others in his own mind. The message, meaning the light, is intended for others, meaning to bring about the existence of the worlds that appear as entities separate from him. Nevertheless, on this level, it is still in the person's own mind. In the analogy, the light shines before the Tzimtzum. In the analog. In the analog, the light shines before the Tzimtzum, and thus there is no concept of existence outside of him. It is this latter illumination that is termed Shechinah. Seemingly, this term is not relevant, for this light is, by definition, above all worlds. True, this light precedes the Tzimtzum and thus cannot possibly serve as a source for the creation of the worlds. For before the Tzimtzum, even the light that was intended to shine within the worlds was included within his unlimited light, for which reason it was necessary that there be a Tzimtzum, moreover, a unique type of Tzimtzum. The first Tzimtzum, which involved a complete withdrawal of God's light. All the subsequent Tzimtzumim involve a mere reduction of divine light. In this instance, in order for the worlds to come into existence, a complete withdrawal of the light is necessary. Nevertheless, despite it being above the level of the worlds, the light is termed Shechinah. The term is appropriate based on the explanation of the Rebbe Maharash given above. In this instance as well, the ultimate intent of this light is that it would descend and enclose itself in the worlds that would come into being. On this basis, we can understand the precise wording of the Midrash. The essence of the Shechinah was manifest in the lower realms, meaning our material world. The revelation of the Shechinah in the lower realms refers not to the term Shechinah as it applies in relation to Atzilus, meaning Malchus, nor to the term Shechinah as it applies in relation to God's infinite light, the Kav. Instead, it was the essence and the innermost dimension of the Shechinah, and was manifest in the lower realms, our material earth. Why is it necessary for the Midrash to say that the essence of the Shechinah was manifest in the lower realms? Because the Midrash is commenting on the verse, I came into my garden, which implies that not only was godliness manifest in this world, but was manifest in this world to a greater extent than in the spiritual realms above. The only level of godliness that could be referred to as I, and still be manifest in this world to a greater degree than in the realms, the higher realms, is God's light that shine before the Tzimtzum. As the Mimer explains, the divine light enclosed within the world descends in an orderly and progressive manner. In the loftier realms, God's light is revealed to a lesser degree, and the greater extent of the descent through the chain-like pattern of existence, the lesser illumination. Hence, following that pattern, the godly light that would be enclosed in this world would be of an extremely low level. It would not be appropriate to say that the verse, "I came into my garden," refers to such a light. For this pattern of descent characterizes the divine light manifest within the Seder Stalshalis, the chain-like pattern of spiritual existence as a whole. All levels following the Tzimtzum follow that pattern. The loftier the realm, the greater the degree of revelation; the lower the realm, the lesser the degree of revelation. Hence, this light could not be manifest in this world to a greater degree than in the higher realms. True, before the sin of the tree of knowledge, godly light was revealed in this world. Thus, it could be said that before the sin, when godliness was revealed in this world, the godly light that was revealed there surpassed that of the higher realms. Thus, this, however, cannot be said, because nevertheless, even then, the light was revealed to a greater extent in the higher worlds. As our sages state, he extended his right hand and created heaven. He extended his left hand and created earth. Just as in a physical sense, the left hand is weaker, and thus the right hand denotes primacy, so too in a spiritual sense, the heavens, the spiritual realms, were created with God's right hand, meaning they received a greater degree of divine light, and the earth, this material world, was created with his left hand, meaning it received a lesser degree of divine light. This verse is referring to the time before the sin, meaning the world directly after its creation. Nevertheless, the pattern was that the loftier the realm, the greater the light that shined in it. Instead, the intent is God's light that transcends the worlds, the light that shined before the Tzimtzum. Since that light transcends the entire spiritual cosmos and all its prevailing patterns, it is possible that it be manifested in this material realm to a greater degree than in the spiritual realm. This is what is meant by the essence of the Shechinah, that this is the sublime level of godly light that was manifest in our material world. Okay, so the summary is, this is just one chapter, so I think I'm going to leave it at this for now, and it would be a great sign to keep this at 26 minutes, so I'll do the summary of this. Now, I should make a note that when I saw the clip of the Rebbe saying this, it was slightly different than this, so I'm not sure exactly how this ties. Maybe that was a portion of it, but in any case, I'll just do the summary, and hopefully we'll close it out at 26. The Mimer is based on a verse from Shir Hashirim, which serves as an analogy for the ongoing love relationship between God and his bride, the Jewish people. In his description of the descent of the Shechinah, the divine presence into the world at the time of the giving of the Torah and the construction of the sanctuary, the Midrash quotes the verse, "I have come into my garden, my sister, my bride." The Midrash observes that the verse does not use the term Legani, which would mean to the garden, but Legani, which means to my garden, a place to which the Shechinah shared a previous connection. On that basis, our sages conclude that originally the essence of the Shechinah was manifest in the lower realms. The Mimer emphasizes that the term Shechinah is used to refer to several different levels depending on the rung of the spiritual cosmos about which it is speaking. When speaking of the Shechinah that was manifest in this physical world, however, the intent is the essence and innermost dimension of the Shechinah. So, So again, if you go to, I think it's either Lubavitch Lept, I think that's one of them, or JEM, one of them has the 1951, the 5711 recording. And from the way I remember it, the Rebbe starts off the same way, talks to the Midrash, brings the pasuk in Shir Shirim, and then it talks about Hashem's Shechinah coming down during the giving of the Torah, I think, if I remember correctly. But he also talks about the seven tzaddikim that would bring the Geula. That's how I remember it from there. So maybe it was a different part, but to be continued. So it'll just be part 1 to be continued.